Well, good morning. As Pastor Catherine said, my name is Pastor Kyle, and I am going to be bringing the sermon this morning. And can I just add my welcome to hers and to Pastor Bernard's? If you are new with us, we're so grateful that you're here, and we don't take your presence for granted. We know it's a scary thing sometimes to step into a new church. It can be intimidating, even online, and so we're just really glad that you're here, that you're checking out Jesus with us, and that you're trying to learn what a journey of faith could look like with a group as wild and crazy as ours. So we're really grateful for you. And this morning we're continuing on in a series. You see, we shared our vision for this coming year about a month ago called Rise Up, taken from Acts chapter 3. And we're following, you're not following pastors into that vision. We together are all following Jesus into that vision. So we thought, let's start out with a series this year on who is Jesus? Who is he? What is he about? And so we've talked about Jesus is, Jesus, like what his name actually means. We've talked about Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. We've talked about Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah, the Anointed One. And today we're going to be talking about Jesus is Lord. Jesus is King. And something is about to happen today that chances are have never happened in your entire history in church. Maybe this is your first day in church and you're like, well, that's not a big surprise. But maybe you've been in church for decades. And I would hazard to guess that for many of you, what is about to happen has never happened in your entire history in church. I am about to read a genealogy from the Bible from start to finish with no omissions. I'm not going to skip anything. I'm not going to buzz over the boring names that nobody really knows about. I'm going to read the whole thing. And to be honest with you, at first when I was thinking about preaching on this passage, I thought to myself, how can I read this in church? Aren't people going to be bored? Aren't they going to tune me out? And we're not even meeting in person. So if you were tired of listening to me, you could just mute me. I mean, let's be honest, right? If you're not interested, you don't really have to listen. And I also thought to myself then, I don't think that people are very interested in reciting the minute details of somebody's personal background in this day and age, are they? And then I realized something. 23andMe is worth $2.5 billion. Ancestry.com is worth $4.7 billion and has 18 million people in their network, in their database. And I can remember a handful of you reading off to me the minute details of your ancestry, down to the very tiny percentages of your 0.1% Mongolian background or your 0.05% Native American background. So apparently we do actually, even in the individualized West, care about genealogy, care about ancestry, care about our roots, where we come from. And in Jesus' day, genealogies were taken very, very seriously. Not just genealogies of ourselves, but genealogies of the people that we were presumed to follow, or of the main characters in the stories that we're about to read. And so Matthew, who is an expert storyteller, by the way, he knows that telling a good story, you have to hook your readers right at the beginning. And some of you think, well, maybe Matthew missed the memo because he opened up with a genealogy. But no, Matthew is actually giving a hook right at the beginning that his earliest readers would have read with bated breath. They would have listened to it with bated breath because in the genealogy of Jesus, we learn some of the most important things that we might ever need to know about the main character of Matthew's story. So as we read this list of ancestors today, friends, I want to encourage you to get into your imagination a little bit. Okay, I want you to imagine as we're reading these names that you are standing in a crowd. And this crowd is watching a royal procession down the main street of the city, down Broadway in downtown Oakland. And and everybody is cheering and shouting, and there's trumpets and fanfare, and one after the next, you see famous person after famous person, historic character after historic character walk right in front of your eyes. People that you've only read about, all leading up to the one we are all here to see, the one we are all here to honor, right, the King. Let me read for us this morning from Matthew chapter 1, verses 1 through 17. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac, the father of Jacob. Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah, the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Perez, the father of Hezron. Hezron, the father of Ram. Ram, the father of Amminadab. Amminadab, the father of Nahshon. Nahshon, the father of Salmon. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed, the father of Jesse, and Jesse, the father of King David. And David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Solomon, the father of Rehoboam. Rehoboam, the father of Abijah. Abijah, the father of Asa. Asa, the father of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat, the father of Jehoram. Jehoram, the father of Uzziah. Uzziah, the father of Jotham. Jotham, the father of Ahaz. Ahaz, the father of Hezekiah. Hezekiah, the father of Manasseh. Manasseh, the father of Amon. Amon, the father of Josiah. And Josiah, the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon. After the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel. Shealtiel, the father of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel, the father of Abihud. Abihud, the father of Eliakim. Eliakim, the father of Azor. Azor, the father of Zadok. Zadok, the father of Achim. Achim, the father of Elihud. Elihud, the father of Eleazar. Eleazar, the father of Matan. Matan, the father of Jacob. And Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. And Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Thus, there were 14 generations in all, from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. See, that wasn't so bad, right? Now, this text gives me a perfect 42-point sermon that I can go through about Jesus' relations with all of his forefathers and mothers. I'm just playing with you. Don't worry. We're actually only going to focus on two main parts of this genealogy, even though there are actually 3 sections, as you might have seen broken down. But we're going to focus on these 2 main parts because Matthew, right away in verse 1, tells us where he wants us to put our attention. He says that Jesus, the Messiah, is the son of David and the son of Abraham. He's the son of David and he's the son of Abraham. And we're going to focus in on these 2 claims because these 2 claims together are absolutely radical. It's these 2 claims that got Jesus killed. It's these claims that Christians in the early church died for. It's the truth of these claims that changes everything in how we see the world, and it gives us hope in an oppressive and disintegrating society. First of all, the first claim is Jesus is the son of David. Jesus is the son of David. Now, Matthew says that Jesus is the son of David. You have to understand some backstory in order to understand the power of that claim. You see, in 2 Samuel chapter 7, God told David, "The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your ancestors, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, your own flesh and blood, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish, and hear this, I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. God promises David that he will establish one of David's sons, his own flesh and blood, as king forever over Israel. And just before that, as part of that larger promise, he said that what would accompany that would be, quote, I will provide a place for my people Israel, and I will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore as they did at the beginning and have done since the time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all your enemies. You see, God tells David that there will come a day when the Israelites will be released from their oppression, when they will truly be set free. And this will happen on the day that God establishes David's greater son as eternal king over Israel. Now, I want us to hear just how radical of a statement this is. And to hear how radical of a statement it is, you almost have to listen through a different set of ears. You got to listen through the ears of King Herod. Okay, if you listen to this statement that Jesus is the son of David from King Herod's perspective, you start to see this statement a little differently. Not just as a statement of religious devotion, but as a statement of political sedition. Herod was the king during Jesus' day, a king over Israel, although he was kind of an under king. The Caesar, the emperor, had put him as king over the Israelite portion of his empire. And Herod was not part of the true royal family. He wasn't part of David's line, even though he pretended to be. So to say that Jesus was, that Jesus could trace his lineage all the way back through each and every king in the line of Israel, all the way back to David, was a statement of sedition. You wouldn't want Herod hearing you say that. Believe me, you wouldn't, because in fact, in the next chapter, Herod gets wind of, as he puts it, the one who has been born king of the Jews. And do you know what he does? He plots to kill the child, Jesus. And when he can't get his hands on Jesus, he thinks, like many oppressive rulers would, that in order to cover his bases, he will just accept some casualties. And he will murder all 2-year-old and younger boys in Bethlehem and in the vicinity around it. Talk about an oppressive regime who hears that Jesus is the son of David and knows that that is not just a religious statement. That if Jesus' identity as king is real, then it is a threat to the foundation of Herod's power. To say that Jesus is Lord is a statement of new and alternative allegiance. It's not, when we say Jesus is Lord, sometimes Christians say that and we think of Lord as a particularly religious term or spiritual term, like Lord equals God. And that's understandable because of a translation in the New Testament. Sometimes when the Lord's name in the New Testament is used, the translators have translated it to Lord to sort of protect the sanctity of God's proper name. But in the New Testament, that word that we translate Lord, it actually first and foremost doesn't mean, it is not a synonym for God. It's a synonym for master or ruler or king. That's why it wasn't just Herod who was upset by the statement, Jesus is Lord. Because the statement, Jesus is Lord, is actually a riff. You might call it a play on the original meme, Caesar is Lord. Caesar used that term of himself in the ancient world, and so when early Christians used the phrase, Jesus is Lord, they were making a decidedly political point, that the greatest power, the greatest ruler that this world has to offer is actually no ruler at all compared to their true king. This is a dangerous claim. This was a dangerous political claim. And it's why Jesus was killed by the Romans. It might not have been the Jewish reason for killing him, but it was the Roman reason for killing him. You see, Jesus wasn't just killed by the Jews. That's a sort of, it's been a claim that Christians have made in a way that's almost been used in anti-Semitic ways throughout history, but really everybody conspired to kill Jesus. They just had their different reasons. And the Romans' reasons, because Jesus was the son of David. It was the charge put right above his head on the cross. It said, here is Jesus, King of the Jews. And Matthew describes it as the charge against him. If you don't think that saying Jesus is Lord is a dangerous political statement, you have to reckon with the cross. Let me put this another way. Christians in the first century were not killed for claiming that Jesus died on the cross for their sins. They weren't. As true and important as that is. They weren't killed for claiming that Jesus was born to a virgin. They weren't. They were killed for saying Jesus is Lord and implying, therefore, that Caesar is not. Jesus, you might say, is the true leader of the free world. And that's an important thing for those of us who are Christians, especially as an election approaches. Yeah, I'm going there. If you're a person that says Jesus is Lord, that means that you cannot have a political allegiance to a candidate or a party that is sacrosanct. You cannot have it. Democrat or Republican. Christians who claim that Jesus is Lord cannot, in good conscience, follow earthly rulers uncritically because our ultimate allegiance is to a higher king with a higher purpose and a higher moral platform. Now, here's the thing. I say that, and I know that probably almost all of us right now listening to this are thinking, well, that's not me. I don't follow my candidate or my party uncritically. Fair enough, you might not. But let me ask you this. Can you name a couple of policies that your candidate supports or has put into place that you think are actually morally objectionable or even reprehensible because of your ultimate allegiance to Jesus? If you can't, you may want to look hard in the mirror and ask yourself where your ultimate allegiance lies. Right. Have you ever just considered voting for somebody of the other party? If you haven't, you may want to ask yourself where your ultimate allegiance lies. Saying that Jesus is Lord, friends, has real live implications on the way that we engage in politics and politically in our world, which is just another way of saying engage in public life. And when we say that Jesus is the king of our life, that means that all of our other allegiances are completely relativized. And believe you me, Jesus is not a member of one of our political parties. When Herod heard of the Son of David, he would have heard a statement of sedition. He would have heard a statement of political sedition, but when the Israelites heard this statement, I think they would have heard a statement of hope. Listen to it from the ears of Jewish people living under the oppression of a tyrannical dictator like Herod. The announcement of one from the line of Judah, a son of David, the true king of Israel, would not just be a radical statement of sedition. It would be a statement of hope. It would be a statement, that a triumphal announcement of the king entering his kingdom, that your suffering is almost over. Imagine hearing that. As a part of a people who have been second-class citizens in the land they call home for over 500 years. Maybe that's been your story and you can barely imagine hearing that. Imagine hearing that from people who have been treated like garbage in their own land. The true king has come. Your suffering is almost over. The real president has been inaugurated, and his is a kingdom where the people will be oppressed no more. The cycle of poverty will be broken. Mass incarceration will cease. State violence will come to an end. Justice will reign in the courts. Those longing for refuge will be welcomed. The sick will seek healing and find it. The oppressed will be set free, and every chain will be broken because the king has come to his kingdom. That, friends, is what you would have heard if you heard that Jesus is the son of David with the ears of an Israelite in the first century. A statement of hope. But then you might have eventually gotten a little bit, pissed off, frankly, at the next statement, which is that Jesus is not just the son of David, he's also the son of Abraham. Now, you might not think that would frustrate an Israelite, but you got to see the way in which Matthew frames it. Matthew is framing that Jesus is son of David all the way around the promise of God to David. And he's framing that Jesus is the son of Abraham around the promise of God to Abraham. Now, if the promise of God to David was, you will have a son that I set eternally on the throne of Israel, then the promise to Abraham in Genesis 12 was this: I will make you into a great nation and I will bless you. So far, so good. I will make your name great and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse, and all the peoples, all the nations of the earth will be blessed through you. Matthew is saying that Jesus is not only the son of David and therefore the hope of Israel, he is saying that Jesus is also the son of Abraham and therefore the hope for the entire world. And if you want to get deeper into why this might upset an early Israelite in the way that Matthew frames this, you gotta really look at the women. You gotta look at the women who are always helpfully upsetting the apple carts of patriarchal societies, aren't they? And when you look at the women in this genealogy, you find that Matthew is confirming through them God's promise to Abraham in Jesus. Let me break it down for you. Jesus, according to Matthew, is not a pure-blooded Israelite. That might surprise some of you. Jesus, if he had his 23andMe done, would not have come back Israelite 100%. Because he had a mother named Tamar. He had a mother named Rahab, both of whom were Canaanite women. He had a mother named Ruth, a Moabite woman. He had a mother named Bathsheba, who is not even named in this passage. She's named as the wife of Uriah. And when we look at to whom Uriah is in the Old Testament, we always hear him called Uriah the Hittite. You see, Jesus, through his through his foremothers, is named as somebody of mixed heritage. He does not just have Israelite blood running through his veins. He's got the blood of the nations running through his veins. And I want to mention that many people have pointed out in studying this passage the scandals associated with at least 3 of the women in this passage. And truth be told, it's more about the scandals of the men associated with these women in the Old Testament. We need to be clear about that. Right? It was Judah who was in the wrong in Genesis, not Tamar. It was David who abused his power, murdered her husband, and took Bathsheba by the power of the king, not Bathsheba. But Matthew is saying something even more scandalous here than the sexual scandals that are involved in the stories of these women. He is saying that Jesus is not just an Israelite. He is saying that his ancestors were Moabites and Canaanites and Hittites, that Jesus has the blood of the nations running through his veins. It's a truly shocking thing to focus on, especially when you consider that ancient Jewish genealogies don't often include women, and when they do, they often include women to focus on or to prove the purity of someone's lineage. But Matthew was including them here specifically, it seems, to do the opposite of that, to prove the impurity of Jesus' lineage. The son, it's unconscious, it's unimaginable, it's unbelievable. The son of David, the true king of Israel, not an Israelite through and through. Wow. This would have absolutely scandalized the Israelites of his day. Wait, we thought the king was going to help us dominate our enemies, but you're saying he shares their blood? Oh, we thought the king was going to bring us military victory or economic power over our neighbors. But you're saying he shares their blood? Yes, Jesus is the king of more than Israel. Jesus' kingdom is not about ethnic or national identity. That's something that we have to understand deeply as Christians when we look at the person of Jesus and when we think about him as king. He is not the king over Israel, and he is not the king over America only. He is the king over the entire world, and our allegiance to Jesus trumps any allegiance to flags or nations that we might have. For Christians, this destroys any lingering racism or ethnocentrism or nationalism from our hearts and from our minds. Our King is Lord over all, and that means that all of us, no matter our race or our country of origin, are citizens of the same kingdom under one king. Nationalism, that is, allegiance to one's country above all else, and a belief that the people of one's country are inherently better or more deserving than another, has therefore absolutely no place in the church. Let me say that again. As followers of King Jesus, yes, nationalism has absolutely no place in the church. That does not mean you can't love your country. That just means that our eyes are fixed on Jesus, not Old Glory. Because Jesus is not just the hope of Israel, he is the hope of the entire world, friends. That is such a bigger picture and something so much better to hope for than this or that election turning out one way or another. And that means that even as our King will give us rest from our enemies, that is what God promised to David, that he will give us rest from our enemies. He will not do it by dominating or oppressing them, because he shares their blood. The King did not set out to win for his people in the way that earthly leaders often do. He is not interested in solving the oppression of one by oppressing another, because the whole world is his kingdom and every person his subject. So if this king's methods aren't military might or economic power, how does he propose to free people from oppression? What does his kingdom really look like? Well, he proposes to do that through the power of self-giving, self-sacrificing, and enemy-blessing love. Have you ever noticed, or have you ever thought about when King Jesus first wore a crown? It was a crown of thorns that his enemies put on him on his way to the cross. Have you ever noticed the first time when Jesus held a royal scepter or put on a royal robe or had people bow down to him and say, "Hail to the king." It was when his enemies, the Roman soldiers, mocked him and beat him on his way to the cross. In fact, the first time that Jesus was publicly pronounced king in multiple languages in a way that everybody could read and hear and understand was above his head in the charges levied against him on the cross. And do you notice how the king of the world dealt with his enemies who mocked him and beat him and put him to death? He said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Friends, Jesus is the hope of the world, not because he is going to dominate, but because he is going to genuinely release the oppressed and the oppressor from the chains that hold them down. Jesus is a different kind of king. He's a different kind of leader than we're used to. He is a king of true justice and a king of true peace. And he is coming back to his kingdom one day, my friends. Mark my words, that he will come back to set every wrong right, to make every injustice just, to make everything that is broken in this world mended, to set everything that is messed up in this world whole again. Jesus, the King, the Son of David, the Son of Abraham, is returning to his kingdom. Take heart and hold on.